Guys, welcome to Fun Learning. In this video, we are going to discuss about the anterior triangle of neck in detail. With no further delay, let's get started. This is a diagram that represents the anterior triangle of the neck. By seeing this diagram, you can say that the apex of the triangle is formed by the manubrium sterni, whereas the base of the triangle is formed by the mandible. Posteriorly, the triangle is formed by the anterior border of sternocleidomastoid muscle, whereas medially it is formed by the midline of the neck. You can easily remember this by remembering the mnemonic S-M-M, whereas S stands for sternocleidomastoid muscle, first M stands for mandible, second M stands for midline of the neck, whereas third M stands for manubrium sterni. The anterior triangle of neck is further subdivided into 4 triangles. The first one is a submental triangle, second one is digastric triangle, third one is muscular triangle, and fourth one is nothing but a carotid triangle. Now let us discuss about the submental triangle with the help of the diagram in detail. This is a diagram that represents the submental triangle. By seeing this diagram, you can easily say that the base of the triangle is formed by the hyoid bone, whereas the apex of the triangle is formed by the mandibular symphysis. Above and laterally, this triangle is formed by the anterior belly of digastric muscle. In addition to it, the floor is formed by the mylohyoid muscle. And the content of this triangle is nothing but submental lymph node as well as anterior jugular vein. So base is hyoid bone, apex is mandibular symphysis. Above and laterally it is formed by the anterior belly of digastric muscle. The floor is formed by the mylohyoid muscle, whereas the content is nothing but submental lymph node as well as the anterior jugular vein. You can easily remember this by remembering the mnemonic SAM-AD. SAM-AD, a biscuit. You can write anything to complete the sentence. In that, S stands for submental lymph node. A stands for anterior jugular vein. These both are nothing but the content of the submental triangle. M is nothing but the mandibular symphysis, which is nothing but the apex of the triangle. H is nothing but the hyoid bone, which is nothing but the base of the triangle. And AD is nothing but the anterior belly of digastric muscle, which is nothing but either border of the triangle, submental triangle. Now let us discuss about the digastric triangle with the help of the diagram in detail. This is a diagram that represents the digastric triangle. By seeing this diagram, you can say that above, this triangle is formed by the base of the mandible as well as a line that is connecting the mastoid process to the angle of the mandible. So above, this triangle is formed by the base of the mandible as well as an imaginary line that is connecting the mastoid process to the angle of the mandible. Below, this triangle is formed anteriorly by the anterior belly of digastric, posteriorly by the posterior belly of digastric. So above it is formed by base of the mandible and an imaginary line that is connecting the mastoid process to the angle of the mandible. Below, anteriorly it is formed by anterior belly, posterior is formed by the posterior belly of digastric muscle. In addition to it, the floor of the digastric triangle is formed by H stands for hyoglossus, M stands for mylohyoid, and another M stands for middle constrictor of pharynx. Fascia. So roof is formed by skin, superficial fascia, investing layer of deep fascia. Superficial fascia consists of some cutaneous nerves, platysma muscle, as well as the cervical branch of the facial nerve. This digastric triangle is further divided into, there is a ligament which is nothing but the stylomandibular ligament, divides this triangle into anterior part and the posterior part. The content of the anterior part as well as the posterior part is nothing but F specs. F stands for facial artery and facial vein. S stands for submandibular gland. And this last S stands for submandibular lymph node. This three forms the content of the anterior part of the digastric triangle. So, stylomandibular ligament divides its digastric triangle into two parts, which is nothing but anterior part and the posterior part. In order to remember this two content of this two part, you have to remember the mnemonic F specs. In that, F stands for facial artery as well as facial vein, whereas this S stands for submandibular gland and this last S stands for submandibular lymph node. This three forms the content of the anterior part of the digastric triangle. Now let us discuss about this three. P stands for parotid gland, E stands for external carotid artery and C stands for carotid sheath. This three forms the content of the posterior part of the digastric triangle. So, P stands for parotid gland, E stands for external carotid artery and C stands for carotid sheath. Now, let us discuss about the muscular triangle of the neck in detail. This is a diagram that represents the muscular triangle. This is its posterior side and this one is the anterior side of the triangle. Postero-superiorly, this triangle is formed by the superior belly of omohyoid muscle. Postero-inferiorly, this triangle is formed by the sternocleidomastoid muscle. And anteriorly, this triangle is formed by the midline of the neck. So, postero-superiorly, it is formed by the superior belly of omohyoid muscle. Postero-inferiorly, it is formed by sternocleidomastoid muscle. And anteriorly, it is formed by the midline of the neck. The content is nothing but, as the name suggests, it consists of only infrahyoid muscle. So, content is nothing but the infrahyoid muscle. Now, let us discuss about the carotid triangle with the help of the diagram in detail. This is a diagram that represents the carotid triangle. By seeing this diagram, you can say that posteriorly the carotid triangle is formed by the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Posteriorly it is formed by the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Anterosuperiorly it is formed by the posterior belly of digastric muscle. Anteroinferiorly it is formed by the superior belly of omohyoid muscle. The floor of the triangle is formed by T stands for thyroid muscle, H stands for ioglossus muscle, and I and M is nothing but the inferior and middle constrictor of pharynx. T stands for thyroid, H stands for ioglossus, I and M is nothing but the inferior and middle constrictor of pharynx. The roof is formed by the skin, superficial fascia as well as deep cervical fascia. Skin and the other two fascia forms the roof of the carotid triangle. Now let us discuss about the content of the carotid triangle in detail. First, you should know what is the content of the carotid sheath. I hope so you know vagus nerve, internal jugular vein, and the common carotid artery forms the content of the carotid sheath. This common carotid artery is further subdivided into internal carotid artery and external carotid artery within the sheath. External carotid artery, once it gets originated from the common carotid artery, immediately it pierces the carotid sheath and goes outside. whereas the internal carotid artery runs throughout the length of the carotid sheath. So the vagus nerve, internal jugular vein, common carotid artery, as well as the internal carotid artery is also the content of the carotid triangle. External carotid artery, under this we have 5 branches that forms the content of the carotid triangle. In order to remember it, just try to remember the mnemonic FALSO. In that, F stands for facial artery, A stands for ascending pharyngeal artery, L stands for lingual artery, S stands for superior thyroid artery, and O stands for occipital artery. F for facial, A for ascending pharyngeal, L for lingual, S for superior thyroid, and O for occipital artery. In addition to it, some of the lymph nodes, hypoglossal nerve, sympathetic trunk, as well as the spinal accessory nerve forms the content of the carotid triangle. So the content of carotid triangle is nothing but, first you have to remember the content of the carotid sheath, which is nothing but vagus nerve, internal jugular vein, and the common carotid artery. This common carotid artery is further subdivided into internal carotid artery and external carotid artery. Under external carotid artery, we have 5 important branches that forms the content of the carotid triangle, which is nothing but FALSO. And in addition to it, you have to remember the mnemonic LHS in order to remember the content of the carotid triangle. L stands for lymph node, H stands for hypoglossal nerve, S stands for sympathetic trunk as well as spinal accessory nerve. With this, I am completing today's video. Thanks for watching. If you like my video, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.